the Education Secretary, Nadhim Zahawi, joins us in the studio. Minister, good to see you. And, of course, congratulations on the new job. But let's dwell on what we heard. And indeed, what we didn't hear from the Prime Minister yesterday. Was it a mistake for Boris Johnson not to mention in his speech three of the big live issues for the country at the moment? Supply shortages, petrol queues, and the biggest overnight cut in benefits that we have ever seen.
Well, I think what he did talk about is skills, which is very much my department, Department of Education. He spoke about the levelling up of opportunity. We've announced a £3,000 effectively bonus to early teaching candidates who we can retain in years 1 to 5, and hopefully in those areas of the country that the children need the most. We announced £500 million to help those who will find it most difficult with their fuel bills, with the utility bills, because of the gas price increase that's obviously global because the global economy is rebounding. That was all during party conference, or the beginning of party conference.
Sure. But these are issues that have been on the front page of every newspaper for weeks now, and the Prime Minister pointedly didn't mention them. The day after a Prime Minister's speech to party conference, we generally have page after page of analysis in the newspapers of the policy announcements that are made. Instead, we have page after page of the jokes that he made.
It's worth remembering that literally a few weeks before party conference, he announced probably the biggest and most important policy that successive governments, including Conservative governments, I have to say, were unable to deal with or deliver, which is adult social care. £36 billion going into fixing.
We know all this.
And that was a massive announcement.
I'm sorry, Minister, but we're talking about the speech yesterday.
I hear you, but I'm just saying, put it in perspective, right? Only literally a few weeks before party conference, we announced what is, I think, an extraordinary achievement by a Prime Minister. Ever since I joined the Conservative Party, successive governments, Labour and Conservative, they deal with it and they never dealt with it.
I understand this, but there is more than a degree of frustration, particularly amongst people who are working, looking for work, but on universal credit, that he didn't mention it. It was, as I've mentioned, the single biggest cut to welfare that we have seen in this country, and he couldn't be bothered to mention it as we enter into colder winter, with fuel prices rising, with food prices rising, and with jobs, let's just say, for some people at a premium.
And it's really important to remember that as we arrived in Manchester, we announced £500 million for winter, for those families that will find it most difficult on their fuel bills, on their utility bills.
We mentioned this yesterday. According to the Legatum Institute, 840,000 people, including almost 300,000 children, are going to be pushed into poverty as a result of the universal credit uplift ending. And he didn't mention it. I'm asking the question again that I started with. Why didn't he? Why did he choose to skirt the biggest political issues of the day?
Well, this is where I would respectfully disagree, because one, we announced literally as we were arriving in Manchester, £500 million for those families for this winter. By the way, on top of the winter fuel allowance, the warm homes grant, all the things for the most vulnerable families to be able to help them over winter months. The £20 uplift was always temporary. Now, it was an important part of the 400 billion. It was about 9 billion of the 400 billion that Rishi Sunak wrapped his arms around the people who are most vulnerable on the lowest pay, many of them on universal credit, through the pandemic. But as we come out the other end, where we're seeing jobs market being incredibly dynamic, there's 2 million fewer people out of work today than forecast through the pandemic.
4.4 million households with 3.3 million children seeing their incomes drop by more than £1,000, and the Prime Minister can't be bothered to mention it. The reason I keep pushing on this point, is it has felt at points during this party conference that the Conservatives have been, somewhat out of touch. I mean, you had Therese Coffey, singing along, at the point at which the universal credit uplift was removed, singing along at a karaoke event. You've got another colleague, Peter Bottomley, talking about the grim struggle of living on an MP's £82,000 a year salary. I mean, where is the connection to people who are struggling at the moment? We had plenty of jokes from the Prime Minister yesterday, but where was he when some people wanted him to reach out to the poorest and some of the hardest working people in this country and reassure them that everything is going to be okay. And he glossed over it.
Well, so where I'm sort of slightly hoping that, as well as quoting things like the £20 uplift, you would also quote that the national living wage has delivered £4,000 more into people's pay packets because of what Boris Johnson done.
He could have made an announcement on raising the minimum wage yesterday. He didn't do that.
But that's done in there's a process to that.
Indeed.
But you didn't mention the £500 million which we announced as we arrived in Manchester for those same vulnerable families that will be delivered by their local councils because they're the ones who know them best for their fuel bills, for their utility bills and for their food needs. That's the same people who may fall through the safety net. Now, lots of other people, my job is to skill them, upskill them. We've got a lifetime skills guarantee that when I was the apprenticeship czar in the coalition government, if you told me there'd be a prime minister who will offer people at any age the ability to pull off modules, to reskill and upskill, and we would back them, I'd have bitten your arm off. But this Prime Minister's delivered that.
But with that czar's hat on, look at the papers this morning and look at the reaction from the business community who, to a greater or lesser extent, feel that the Conservatives are not the party of business anymore. I mean, the boss of Iceland, himself a committed Brexiteer, says he's been warning for about labour shortages for months with absolutely no response from the government. You know, the Adam Smith Institute described the rhetoric from the Prime Minister yesterday as economically illiterate. We heard from the Conservative think tank Bright Blue, the public will soon tire of Boris's banter if the government does not get a grip of mounting crises. The polling that we have done shows that his speech outside the conference hall was less well received than that of Keir Starmer. Why is this party, a party that has long held its business credentials up as a reason to vote for it, on a warpath with business at the moment?
Well, I don't agree with you. First thing I would say is we are the party of business.
I haven't made these quotes up.
No, you haven't. Let me just give you, my side of this. I met with the CBI yesterday, Tony Danker and Karen Balamoria, and we all agree that actually look at what we've done on seasonal workers, increased the number by 5,000, HGV drivers, increased the visa numbers by 5,000. But that visa bit is not the answer, the long-term answer. The long-term answer is you work with business. Let me try and bring it to life for you. In the food industry, I went to Wilmore, which is in my constituency, one of the biggest suppliers of fresh food and veg to the supermarkets. I said, how are you doing? They said, we're doing well. Yes, there are pressures because of all the issues that you've just described, but because of Rishi Sunak's tax break for us to invest in equipment, we can get 25% of that back. We're investing in equipment and upskilling and reskilling and increasing the wages of our people because they're going to have to work with automation. And
by way of contrast, the Federation of Small Businesses says it's equally remarkable to hear the benefits of a low-tax economy vaunted when the government has just signed off a hike in national insurance contributions, which we estimate will cost at least 50,000 jobs.
So what I would say to everybody is, look, let's work together. We've seen retailers who've invested in technology and have done really well. Others like Topshop and Topman didn't make that investment and haven't done so well. We've seen SMEs take advantage, £100 billion of grants and loans to support SMEs. That is what this government is doing to help business. Let's do this together. Let's produce that high-wage, high-skilled economy because it is doable.
Let's talk then on your brief. There was a policy exchange event that you spoke at on Sunday in the fringe of the conference. You were asked whether or not you planned to get school children to wear masks. You said, we have got contingency plans in the department if we see further disruption. Do those contingency plans include a return to children wearing masks, perhaps even a return to bubbles? So
the good news is that, and thanks to the brilliant teachers and support staff and parents and children, 99% of schools are open. Attendance has gone up. The last set of figures I looked at was about 90%. That obviously will fluctuate depending on infection rates.
Yep.
But my priority is to protect education, keep those schools open. Rachel D'Souza, the Children's Commissioner, had a 500,000 survey of children at school. 2,500 children of Gypsy and Roma families, 16,000 of SEND. They all said they want to be back at school. They value that interaction with
come on, tell me. Masks,
so we
masks
have
and
got
bubbles. Come on.
So we've got a contingency plan. as you would expect me to do, as especially being the vaccines minister.
Does it contain?
It contains lots of contingency, including masks.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but at the moment, I don't want to return to bubbles because actually you saw the fall off in attendance, which really does harm mental well-being, mental health of children. You saw it in Richard D'Souza's survey, and I don't want to return to that. And my priority is to protect education and keep schools open and children at school.
We're all very fond of recycling these days, no more so than yourself, with this £3,000 uplift for teachers. This was a policy that was binned a couple of years ago.
Well, it's a policy that worked. This is different and better because the teachers will be eligible for 5 years to be able to take advantage of that, up to £3,000 if they stay in the profession, in maths, in chemistry, in computing, in physics, in the schools that most need them.
Sure. Just on ventilation, though, where are we in terms of the pilot programmes, the getting the CO2 monitors into schools, and possibly we're getting to a stage where schools can't simply have the windows open anymore. So what are we doing about that?
So we're getting 300,000 CO2 monitors into schools.
The last time your predecessor spoke there, he talked to me about that.
Yeah.
Have we not made any progress?
No, we have. Absolutely. They're going out by the end of this month. We would have the real uplift in those numbers into schools, really important. We're also looking at ventilation and how we make sure that schools have access to ventilation.
How might you do that? How might you do that?
There's lots of technology. And we're looking
but how might you ease their access to that technology? Are we talking about kind of the central government buying it? Are we talking about grants being given to schools?
So I'm looking to buy a quantity and then also create a market that schools can access if they need them.
Excellent. Very, very briefly, on your old brief, the vaccines minister, story that appeared yesterday, did France really steal 5,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine from us?
I can't possibly comment.
Yes, you can.
Look, we had a challenging situation with the EU Commission. We always took the view that we don't block any exports of any vaccines from the UK. The way we got our vaccines through having good contracts, and Kate Bingham did a brilliant job, as did the Vaccines Task Force as a whole, in delivering those contracts. And the EU Commission worked with us on making sure our supplies from Belgium, Pfizer and elsewhere worked well. And of course, we did everything we can to help France and other countries as well.
Well sidestepped. Minister, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.